Hello, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to UTAS, the University of Tasmania, for this Island of Ideas talk this evening. I'm Dr. Larissa Bartlett. I'm a research fellow at the Menzies Institute, and my area is mental health, but I'm not going to be one of the content experts this evening. I'm really looking forward to being your MC and to introducing our fantastic speakers to you as we progress through the evening. Okay, so with this evening we meet on Lutruwita, Tasmania, the unceded land of the Muwinina people. For thousands of years, Tasmanian Aboriginal people have shared their stories, wisdom and humour as part of the fabric of community life, connecting people to each other and to country. As we gather in Nipaluna, Hobart, between Kunanyi, Mount Wellington, and Titumili, Minanya, River Derwent, to explore the science, psychology, and practice of laughter, we acknowledge that this has always been a place of deep cultural knowledge and rich oral traditions. We pay our respects to elders past and present, to those who did not make elder status, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are with us this evening. We affirm that our shared responsibility to listen, learn, and to work towards a future that honours Aboriginal culture, history, and care for country. So the Island of Ideas Talks program of the University of Tasmania reflects the university's commitment to public conversations that connect curiosity, expertise, and community. And while laughter might not necessarily appear on your doctor's prescription, it has long been discussed as a universal remedy. Research has suggested that laughter can influence brain chemistry, improve mood, reduce stress, and even assist in physical health recovery. But what do the experts say? Is laughter really akin to medicine? And how does it work when we are all ill, ageing, or facing life's challenges? Tonight, we're going to explore laughter from multiple different perspectives: the science, the psychology, the art, and the lived experience. I'm really excited to listen to our speakers this evening. They really do offer a range of perspectives on the benefits or the potential benefits of laughter. It's fantastic. So our first speaker this evening, I'm going to pop up and introduce each speaker just before they speak so that we don't have to hold things in our minds. We can just roll with the entertainment. But first up, we have Daryl Peebles, Dr. Daryl Peebles. Daryl has spent over 40 years making people laugh. As a comedian, a writer, a ventriloquist, and a magician. But behind the jokes, there's a very serious message. With a PhD from the University of Tasmania, Daryl has explored the value of humour in workplaces and now really focuses on the role of humour for mental health as we're ageing. I'm going to hand over now to Daryl. Please, a round of applause for Daryl Peebles.
Thank you for the introduction, Larissa. Yes, Larissa mentioned I did my PhD here at the University of Tasmania with the School of Business and Economics, and I did it looking at the value of humour in workplaces. But after a long career in the corporate world, I'd also had a parallel career in pro-am theatre, especially comedy. And what I found with my PhD was it merged those two lives. I suppose the other thing is I did this at the end of my career, so I was a part-time, very mature age student, and I graduated about the same time as I retired. So my interest in workplaces sort of continued, and I still do work with corporates around Australia, but my interest sort of segued into ageing, the value of humour in ageing specifically, and mental health more generally. And I know what you're thinking, this bloke up here, he can't be worried about aging. He's a nice young fellow, isn't he? Actually, to be quite honest, I've turned 75, which means I've probably entered the final quarter of the football game of life. And I just hope I'm not in time on already. But there's still hope for me. I mean, I'm still younger than the King of England. And if I were an American citizen, I'd be young enough to be the president and probably do a better job. So there you go. And look, it's aging. Ageism shouldn't count in this, should it? I mean, I believe Harrison Ford, you know, Harrison Ford, the actor, about 82, considering a new movie. It's to be called Indiana Jones and the Enlarged Prostate. No, seriously, folks, many of the positive aspects of humour that my study identified in assisting productivity in workplaces are also beneficial to the positive ageing and as a buffer, and beneficial as a buffer against some of the major manifestations of mental illness. And high amongst these is anxiety and depression, which seem to raise their ugly heads in an aging population as it does in workplaces. So by a show of hands, who leapt out of bed this morning and went, yeah, let's go, got a life to live, yeah, it's going to embrace this? Out of 200 people, I see 12 hands. By way of contrast, who got out of bed looking more like this fellow this morning? And the people that are listening on Radio National, Big Ideas, this is the grouchy bloke with his cup of coffee and he's still in his fluffy slippers. I love Jim Davis and the Garfield cartoons. One of my favourite cartoons. I think he's really nailed it with this one. He said, there we go. And again, for our Radio National listeners, it's Garfield looking very grouchy saying, I might as well work. I'm in a bad mood anyway. Very cheesed off. Some years ago, the World Health Organization developed this thing called a wellness index. And the wellness index has been developed by a lot of people, but they all involve the same sorts of things. They talk about to live our life to the full, we should enjoy a healthy diet, we should get regular gentle exercise, adequate sleep, social engagement and connection. And amongst those, this connection thing is enjoying a good laugh, a shared enjoyment, if you will. And these factors are shown to be a buffer against physical and mental illness and a benefit to health generally, the maintenance of health generally in older adults. Yes, here we go. So you've got to be active. The well-being factors, index factors include being active, being well rested. Who got a good night's sleep? Yeah, that's good. Being relaxed, being interested in life, and coming along here tonight, you've all expressed, I think, an interest in life, at least in things that are affecting your life, and importantly, being cheerful. When I worked in the corporate sector, I used to, and I still do, I ask people what it is they're bringing with them to work today. So what are you carrying with you today when you're coming to work? And tradies always say, well, I've got my tools, I did a 5-year apprenticeship, I've had 15 years experience, I got my ute, oh, that's what I'm taking to work today. Or as I talked to some bank call center operators recently, I said, what are you bringing with you to work today? And one woman said, what I'd like to take with me today is a magic wand. I said, why? She said, make all the angry callers disappear. But whatever you're bringing with you today, what people don't recognise or don't admit to is the fact that they're carrying other things to work with them. They're carrying anger. They might be carrying fear, or they might be carrying grief or sadness. And the sad thing about that is that those things are getting in the way of our natural state, the state in which we operate at our optimum. That is a natural state, of course, of joy. And joy is an emotion where a person has feelings or contentment or satisfaction. When you've got that lovely sense of joy with you, you are operating at your optimum. So what does get in the way? Well, it's those things that we just talked about. It's anger, it's fear, it's grief. And these come in a continuum. Like with anger, you can be slightly frustrated, like I was coming in tonight, coming down the Brooker Avenue, somebody cut me off, no indication, just changed lanes right in front of me. I had to brake, said the obvious, use your bloody indicator. My lovely partner said, maybe it's on the blink. Okay, silly joke, but I went from an elevated state of anger, if you will, or slight frustration, to laughing. It's very hard to be angry when you're actually laughing. You could be just frustrated, as I said, or you could be in a rage. And the depth of these emotions will take you further and further away from joy. But as we'll see, when you are showing signs of coming back to joy, you're going upwards through the through these emotions. So your fear, you might be slightly apprehensive because you can see a spider in the corner of the room, or you could be absolutely petrified because you're on an aeroplane and the bloke next to you's got a parcel in his lap and it's ticking. You can see there's a continuum of these, and the same with grief. You could be just slightly unhappy because your Tats Lotto numbers didn't come up last night, or you could be absolutely inconsolable because you've lost a loved one or a valuable possession. And I like to tell the story that after the Dunalley bushfires, we did a charity event, a concert, raising money for victims, and I did a little comedy set, after which we're having supper after the event, and a lady came out of the audience and said, "May I give you a hug?" And I said, "Of course you can." And she gave me a hug, and she said, "Daz, that's the first time I've laughed since my house burnt down." It just about brought me to tears because the recognition, I guess, she'd had a good laugh. That laugh was probably the first indication that she was going to start recovering from the trauma, the grief of losing a house. It was a first indication of a step back towards this wonderful state of joy. So being light does take us back to that state of joy. And also it's an indicator that we are returning to that same state of joy. Laughter is a universal sign of joy. It's contagious and unifying. We're going to talk later about the sociological aspects of laughter, that if you're in a room together and you're watching a comedian or whatever and you're laughing, and there are people around you laughing, even if you're not listening to the jokes, just the other people laughing will make you laugh, or you'll find that. That's why it's better, I think, to watch comedy in company than sitting at home alone watching comedy, although whatever way you get your humour, your comedy is going to be beneficial. And this is a beautiful quote: "We all laugh and smile in the same language." I think that's worth remembering. So some of the effects of laughter, the positive effects, they can increase mood, optimism, energy, and cognitive function. And the laughter will help us decrease anxiety, stress, loneliness, depression, and tension. And we'll be exploring that in more detail during the session. Love this. Again, for our radio listeners, it's an old Volkswagen. It's a vintage Volkswagen, a very good motor car. But this one says it goes from 0 to 60 in 11 minutes. Love it. And you sort of recognise, I'm recognising I'm getting old because now it takes me an hour and a half to watch 60 minutes. I just thought but we're not as young and agile as we once were, and this will lead, or can lead, to anxiety and depression. And this has become my field of interest. And I guess I'm aware that we're losing, at our age, my age, I'm losing friends and family members, and it starts to make you concentrate, I guess, or think about your own mortality and what is ahead, the uncertainty of what lies ahead, and that is sort of leading to fear, anxiety and depression. And these days I go to far more funerals than weddings, for example. I went to a funeral last Thursday and I was the stupid bugger who caught the wreath. You got to, and I suppose this is the natural way to go. Look, I haven't always had this fear of aging or death as a source of anxiety. I've always had an anxiety over speed humps. I'm slowly getting over those. I went to Centrelink the other day and I filled out a form. I got that wrong. Apparently, constant anxiety is not the correct answer to what state are you in. Some stimuli for laughing. And again, Alison will be talking a bit more about this. Little children, you've done it, I'm sure you've done it with your own kids or grandkids. Tickling, great stimuli for laughing. Nitrous oxide, remember the old laughing gas? Little story here, I had to have my wisdom teeth out some years ago and Dr. Ostwick said, "Okay, Daz, I'm going to pull these 4 teeth. Here's an injection." I said, no, Doc, no injection. I'm absolutely petrified of needles. I'll see it, I'll faint, so you can't give me an injection. He said, "What about nitrous oxide, laughing gas? That'll help." I said, "Oh, no, Dr. Ostwick, when I had my tonsils out as a kid, they gave me that at the Burnie General Hospital. I threw up everywhere. You wouldn't want that in your surgery." He said, "Oh, there's nothing for it, mate. You better take this little tablet." Handed me this little blue pill. I said, "What is it?" He said, "It's Viagra." I said, "Will that ease the pain?" He said, "No, it'll give you something to hang on to while I pull the tooth." And I tell that terrible joke to illustrate another stimuli for laughter, and that is, of course, embarrassment. Now, some of you may have laughed that time with that terrible joke out of embarrassment. It doesn't matter, you laughed, and that's the main thing. That's the important thing. Another thing is specific yogic exercises. People have been to laughter therapy groups, laughter groups. You see them sometimes down in St. David's Park, lovely thing. They stand around, feign laughter until the laughter just develops naturally, and we're all getting the same benefit of the laughter, the same physiological and psychological benefits, regardless of what stimulated the laughter. The one that I'm particularly interested in, of course, is humour, and that's where the comedy and the theatre comes into it, I guess. Okay, moving right along. So laughter is a physical reaction which is mostly associated with humour. And some of the benefits, the physiological benefits, when we laugh, when you're just laughing, you are gulping, you're getting more air into your lungs. Your heart rate increased slightly. So you're getting oxygenated blood pumping to the extremities of your body and your vital organs. That alone will make you feel good or better, maybe. The psychological, Alison will be talking more about the release of endorphins in our brain when we laugh and what happens. The sociological, we'll all laugh together. That silly joke about the dentist, 200 people laughing. Some were laughing, not necessarily because the joke was a little bit rude, but because other people were laughing, and that's great. The sociological benefits of laughter. And it's the inclusion and connection, and that's the important thing that harks back to the wellness index. So, don't believe me, folks. I'm just a boy from West Hobart who loves what I do. Wiser people have summed this up with some words like the most wasted day of all days is one without laughter. The novelist E. Cummings. I love this one. Laughter is the shortest distance between two people. Victor Borge, the wonderful Scandinavian entertainer, and Phyllis Diller. If you don't have wrinkles, you haven't laughed enough. So, folks, that's all from me. I'm going to hand back to Larissa. Thanks for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Daryl. I love most of that. Moving right along, we have Associate Professor Alison Canty joining us now. Alison is a neuroscientist at the Wicking Dementia Research and Education Centre. And Alison's research is focused on brain health, repair and ageing. And she leads the Wicking Centre programs that are translating cutting-edge research into real-world impact. She'll take us inside the body and the brain to explore what actually happens when we laugh and how this might help us when we have conditions like dementia and other forms of chronic ill health. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks, Larissa. Laughter has been recognised as good medicine for centuries, but it's really only recently that we've started to gather the evidence and conduct really rigorous research to quantify the health benefits of laughter. And as this has happened, a new branch of therapy, a complementary therapy, has emerged, and we call it laughter therapy. It's described as any type of therapy that uses humour to relieve pain and stress and improve a person's sense of well-being. Now, if you search the medical literature for laughter therapy, from about 1956, you see a trickle of reports appearing, and then a significant increase in the late 1990s. And the uptick was probably initiated by a man by the name of Norman Cousins. Now, he lived with a condition called ankylosing spondylitis, which is a really painful arthritis of the back. And he made the observation that after a good laugh with his friends, for about 2 hours afterwards, he didn't feel pain anymore. And so at the age of 50, he started to systematically study the health benefits of laughter for his own health and the health of others. And we think that the ball's really been rolling ever since. So in healthcare settings, trained performers known as clown doctors visit places like children's hospitals to make jokes and entertain children. And even window cleaners have been seen scaling the walls of buildings dressed up as superheroes to improve the well-being of children and adolescents as they go past. And these kind of activities are commonplace now around the world in many hospital settings. And we see improved psychological well-being and emotional responses in children and adolescents. Now, there are many ways of inducing laughter, and Darryl talked about some of them. One of them that he didn't mention was pathological laughter, which is where we have a neurological injury and we have experienced constant or really inappropriate laughter. But when it comes to laughter, it doesn't really matter how it starts because the effects that you feel in the body are pretty similar. So what is happening in the body when we laugh? Is it good for us and does it make us healthier? So roughly speaking, we can break down the effects of what happens in your body into two categories. There's the physical effects or physiological effects, and then there's the psychological effects that are up in the brain. We'll talk about the brain a little bit later, but let's start with the physical effects and talk about the muscles of breathing and sound production. So when you breathe, sitting at rest like you are now, the major muscles that are working are your diaphragm, and as you take a breath in, your diaphragm is contracting and pulling the air into your lungs. And at the same time, the intercostal muscles between your ribs start to relax, which allows the rib cage to expand. And then as you've got a full breath of air, those muscles in between your ribs start to contract again to push the air back out. And when you're sitting there at rest, like you are now, you get really smooth waves of these muscles contracting and relaxing. When we start to talk, the diaphragm makes even larger contractions, and then all the muscles around the head and the neck start to work in really small movements to control the air as it goes out through the vocal cords and out of the mouth to create speech sounds. But then when you start laughing, all of those muscles start to spasm and they come out in spurts of contraction and relaxation, and it's largely uncontrolled. And it's actually a really a good workout for all those muscles in the head and the neck and the body. And if you have a look here, when you look in a real-time MRI image, you can see the upper part of the body and you see the muscles of the face and the throat and the large tongue there all starting to work. You might see the shoulder muscles moving, and lower down you would have the contractions of the diaphragm, the abdominal and the intercostal muscles that are all working together. You won't be surprised to hear that prolonged laughing is actually a really good workout for your body. It improves your core strength, and we know that if you laugh for about 15 minutes, you'll burn about 40 calories. Nice. Maybe we'll do that tonight over the 2 hours with a few bursts of laughter. And in response to this increased muscle use, your heart rate goes up, the blood starts pumping, you get more oxygen into your body, as Darryl was explaining. And when it comes to heart health, you might be surprised to hear that in a study of 300 people, your tendency to laugh from day to day is inversely correlated with coronary heart disease. So what that means is the more you laugh, the less likely you are to have a heart attack, which is a really nice trade-off, I think, for a little bit of laughter. Okay, so what have we got so far? Laughing gives your muscles a workout, it boosts your breathing rate and your oxygen in your body, your brain, but there are other effects of the laughter and they're all happening up in the brain. So let's chat a little bit now about how the brain works. So the basic building blocks of the brain are neurons. They're very long and thin. There's about 86 billion of them in the brain. And the very longest neuron in the body is not actually in your brain, but it's in your leg. And it goes from the middle of your back all the way down to your big toe. Now, neurons are electrically active and they communicate with waves of electricity. And they're also really tightly packed together in the brain. But if you zoom right in on the neurons, you'll see that they don't actually touch each other. At the end of one neuron and the beginning of the next one, there's a little gap, and that's called a synapse. And when the wave of electricity comes down the neuron, little packets of chemicals get released and they diffuse out into the gap, and then they get picked up on the other side by the neighbouring neuron by little gates or receptors. And then through a series of cellular signalling events, that gets turned back into electricity, and then the communication continues going down through that second neuron. Now, these little packets of chemicals are called neurotransmitters, and there's over 100 different types of them, and they all do different things, either turning up or dialing down the communication between different groups of neurons. And neurons don't work in isolation. They cluster together into functional areas in the brain. So when it comes to the brain, we can have a look inside the head, we can look at schematic diagrams, but another thing you can do is to just make a fist with your hand. So do it now and cover your fingers over your thumb and hold them really tight. And imagine that this is one side of your brain. Your wrist is your spinal cord, the palm is the brainstem where we have breathing and heart rate. And then if you just tuck your thumb inside your hand, that's the limbic system. And that's the first part of the brain to get activated when we start laughing. And in the limbic system is a structure called the hypothalamus, where most of those, that neurotransmitter release I just talked about, the coordinated neurotransmitter release happens in the hypothalamus. And then if you curve your fingers over the top of your limbic system, over your thumb, that's the cerebral cortex, where all of the higher order thinking and planning and speech and language occurs. In the middle there, your middle finger is the motor cortex, and that when that gets activated, that controls all those muscles we just talked about in the head and the neck and the body. Out in your knuckles, that's the auditory cortex. That gets activated when we laugh, especially in social contexts where we hear and respond to other people laughing. And then at the very tips of your fingers, in your fist, that's the prefrontal cortex, like the CEO of the brain where the executive function occurs. And that part is also really active when we're laughing. And these four areas, the limbic system, the motor cortex, the auditory cortex, and the prefrontal cortex, all experience a wave of neurotransmitter release when we laugh. And there's a combination of them, 4 particular neurotransmitters that are the feel-good chemicals in the brain. And when they get released during a laughter event, we get feelings of relaxation, stress reduction, enhanced mood, and feelings of pleasure. So these neurotransmitters, the first one is dopamine, results in feelings of pleasure and reward. Then there's serotonin, which is tightly linked to mood regulation and helps alleviate feelings of stress. And these two together, dopamine and serotonin, are decreased in conditions like depression. Then we have the endorphins. These are the natural painkillers. And these are probably what Norman Cousins was feeling when he described those euphoric feelings of laughter and pain relief. And then the last one is oxytocin, which is the social bonding hormone. And these, the endorphins and the oxytocins don't just stay in the brain, they get released out into the body, and they're responsible for all kinds of pleasurable effects that we experience. So how can we measure these neurotransmitters then? Because they're really small and they diffuse quickly through the synapses and out into the brain. But we want to know what the evidence is for this neurotransmitter release following laughter. And one way that we can do this is to have a look at the gates or the receptors that grab onto the endorphins in this case. And we can see them by using fancy imaging, for example, PET imaging. And so in this study that I'll tell you about, that groups of 3 men would come in and sit on a couch, and for 30 minutes they would watch YouTube videos, comedy YouTube videos, and the researchers would count how many laughs per minute they would hear. And the average that they got from sort of 3 healthy young men was 1.03 laughs a minute. And after 30 minutes, they took one of the men and put them in the PET scanner, and they looked for where the endorphin neurotransmitter was binding in the brain. And they saw activation in lots of parts of the brain, but in particular, they saw activation right at the very front of the brain in the orbitofrontal cortex, right in the prefrontal cortex. And you do this in lots of people, and you start to see the more laughs per minute you get, the more binding of endorphin receptors is occurring. So there are other ways to do this kind of research. Not everyone has access to a PET scanner. And what we can do is to take advantage of the fact that endorphins are natural painkillers. And so we can use changing pain thresholds as an indicator of how much endorphin release there is. And so what they did with these 3 men is, before they went in to their 30 minutes of comedy video watching, they got them to do a wall sit. And when you do a wall sit, you can hold it for a bit of time, and then it gets so painful eventually you fall over. And so they got them to do a wall sit before the videos and then again at the end of the videos. And in all of the cases, the men were able to hold the wall sit for much longer after they've had 30 minutes of laughing. And so this is another way that we can use like a proxy measure for neurotransmitter release to really explore the evidence in terms of laughter. Okay, so we've talked about some of the neurotransmitters in the brain, and there's one other chemical messenger that I'd like to talk about, and that's cortisol. Cortisol is the primary messenger for stress in the body. And when the body detects a change that it considers a threat, Our friend in the limbic system, the hypothalamus, releases neurotransmitters, and in a cascade of events, we get cortisol released out into the blood. And cortisol does a good job. What it does is to improve our focus and reaction times. When you get a really acute spike of cortisol, it also suppresses the immune system and elevates the blood pressure, effectively priming the body to respond to a threat. And I'm sure my cortisol levels are really high right now. I'm hoping they'll go down soon, but if they did stay up for a long period of time, that's what happens when we experience something like chronic stress. And when cortisol levels go up and they stay up, it's actually a poor outcome for our cognition. We can't remember as well. It's harder to pay attention. The immune system is depressed and we get sick more often, and our heart rate goes up and it stays up. So why am I telling you about cortisol? Well, there's a lot of building evidence that laughter therapy can reduce cortisol levels and to help alleviate feelings of stress. And in 2023, some authors got together and they searched the medical literature for all of the studies that looked at cortisol levels before and after a laughing event. And it doesn't matter how the laughter is initiated, whether it's in single sessions, multiple sessions, groups, or individually, in all cases, they reported about a 32% decrease in cortisol after the laughter. That's just one example. We can look at these biological measures of cortisol. You can also use other proxy measures. For example, when cortisol levels go down, you feel less stressed. So there are other studies, for example, 500 cancer patients experienced laughter therapy and then reported decreased levels of anxiety, depression, pain, and fatigue. Okay, I'd like to take us on a different approach now and talk about something a little bit closer to home. I'm going to share some stories of local Tasmanians who are going through a particularly hard time at the moment. And as we age, the chances of experiencing cognitive decline increase in the form of dementia. And there's no getting around it. Living with dementia can be incredibly stressful, both for the person with a diagnosis and their family members. And in that case, we see a decrease in the neurotransmitters, those feel-good neurotransmitters that occur. And in our storytelling sessions together, we talk about what a typical day entails for people. And most people, it turns out, recount really funny stories about their short-term memory loss or not being able to find things they've put away or how they like to have a laugh down at the local pub. And there's no doubt that this laughter would help to relieve feelings of stress and anxiety and also helps to bring people closer together. And the two men that you're about to meet both have dementia. And it's very clear in these videos that you'll see that these men can engage in social interactions and they can share a laugh. Now, as their disease progresses, it might be that they lose the ability to have that cognitive component of humour. But remember what I told you at the start, it doesn't matter how the laughter starts. You get the same health benefits, the physical and the psychological benefits. So let's hear what they have to say.
And inevitably, there'll be 5 or 6 of us there. And one of the lads will start up a conversation and say, there's no point telling you won't remember, you've dementia, and we laugh about it. Or if I might say, there's no point telling me I've dementia, I won't remember it. And we can have a laugh over it.
And putting away the things is a different matter. They can go into different places, but you just get, it's not a problem. I just have to find them. Sometimes when I'm stumped, I might say, do you think you know where you put the potato masher? That's a bit of fun.
And tell me about a typical day for you. How you spend your time.
Typical day today, I think we're getting ready for this. And oh, God. Sorry. So, what was the question again?
Tell me about a day. What do you do?
Oh, that's typical.
Yeah.
So I read non-fiction. I've got a book now, one of Madeleine's that I don't think I've read before. This is it. The other day, we were going to bed and I have a read while Madeleine's getting ready, and I'm reading this book, and oh yeah, up to about page 120 or something. Oh yeah. And then Madeleine came out, what are you doing reading my book? So I can read books that I've haven't started and read books for the 10th time and not know I've read them. That's a typical day.
Yeah, another way that we've been exploring using humour and laughter at the Wicking Dementia Centre is by working with comedians. We worked with Gavin Baskerville last year to co-write a comedy script to talk about the importance of brain health. We're always looking for new ways to communicate evidence about the brain. And so with dementia, for example, we know that it's now a disease of midlife and it can start 20 years before you might get any symptoms. And so what we did is, as academic scientists, we brought the facts and the evidence, and Gavin helped us to turn them into interesting and engaging and hopefully memorable stories. And he started by describing the brain and then some of the common things that start to go wrong. And then importantly, he gave some tips and strategies about what you can do to improve your brain health. Here's a bit about what he had to say.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Gavin. As Alison said, I'm a stand-up comedian. And it is kind of ridiculous when you think about it, because at the end of the day, your brain is essentially a lump of meat in your head with a bit of electricity running through it, and it does all that stuff. Crazy, right? But it's it's not even, it's actually even worse than that, because I don't know if you're actually aware of the chemical composition of the brain. It's mostly lipids, right? So it's essentially fat, right? In fact, 60% fat. That's a bit depressing, isn't it? Maybe we should spin that a bit better. Your brain is 40% fat-free.
What is it that makes a good medicine? I'll be fast. A good medicine needs to be effective, safe, specific, bioavailable. It needs to be easy to use, affordable, accessible, ethically developed, and have minimal side effects. We haven't talked about side effects today. They're rarely reported when it comes to laughter studies, and the only ones I've ever seen are occasional incontinence. So it's definitely ticking many of the boxes. It won't cure cancer. It might not help the root cause of poor health, but it's certainly really good for your body. It gives you a workout, cocktail of feel-good neurotransmitters in your brain, and really it fosters social bonding and resilience and creates a positive feedback loop of emotional and physical benefits. Thank you.
Beautiful. Isn't it amazing the complexity of this body at cellular level as well as all of the felt experiences? It's just, I find it constantly fascinating. Thank you, Alison. Next, we're going to hear from Danielle Jackson. Danielle is a project manager, a drama therapist, a counsellor and a performance artist with the Terrapin Puppet Theatre. So excited about this one. Danielle combines creative storytelling and therapeutic practice to help people explore difficult emotions through humour and play. Tonight, Danielle will share how drama and puppetry can be powerful tools for well-being, showing how laughter supports resilience in changing times. We'll give a round of applause for Danielle.
Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Jackson and I'm from Terrapin. And today I'm going to talk to you about one of our programs that's called Forever Young Puppetry in Aged Care. I hope that in our very short, and I will try and keep it short, 15 minutes, that I can give you an example of how humour can be applied accessibly in practice and in clinical environments. So we've all heard the saying, laughter is the best medicine, but what does that actually look like for someone living with dementia, in isolation, or experiencing grief? Forever Young might have a sort of response to that question. With Tasmania's over 85 population set to double in the next decade, it's hard to find anyone who doesn't have a personal story about ageing, be that a loved one, a friend, a daughter, a sibling, a partner. And inevitably, these living with dementia will need some form of care. In fact, most of us in our later lives will need some form of care, which means that we all have a voice in shaping what that care can look like. And the arts can play a meaningful part in improving social, emotional, and cognitive well-being outside of conventional methods. One piece of research that stayed with me in the development of Forever Young was that even when speech and memory may decline, imagination does not. And where there's imagination, there's play, expression, connection, presence, and laughter. And that's where Forever Young sits, a creative and relational approach to aged care through the rich world of theatre. Terrapin's purpose is simple: to make lives better, shift realities, and create connection. We're committed to community and we're committed to impact. We've been doing this for over 40 years, and we're proud to be Tasmania's only professional theatre company with multi-year state and federal funding. We bring together artists and audiences from one of the oldest and most powerful platforms, puppetry. Our giant roving puppets and interactive installations bring joy to festivals and public spaces, while our theatre works engage audiences in Tasmania, mainland Australia, and internationally. Recently, programs like Forever Young have deepened our focus on making an impact here in Tasmania, especially to communities often overlooked, like people living in aged care, high school students, new migrants, and refugee groups. So a very, very quick moment to tell you how I fit into all of that. So I came across working with Terrapin as a registered drama therapist and as a counsellor with a background working in diverse and complex sectors, including Aboriginal health, family violence, homelessness, disability, and aged care. But above all of that, for over 20 years, I worked as an actor, as a professional actor, a theatre maker, a physical performer, and a puppeteer. And it's from that creative world that it still informs all of my work today. In 2021, I began collaborating with Terrapin, and it was COVID time. We were being challenged to think very differently about connection, especially towards our elders, many of whom are still feeling the ripple effects of being isolated today. So it all started with one simple question. Could puppetry have a meaningful place in aged care? Do you hear that? Oh. I know, there's a lot of people. There's way too much. Puppets evoke reaction. They're not confined to the same social expectations that us humans are. And because of that, they give people permission to be real, to be vulnerable, to be expressive, to be silly. And no matter someone's cognition, puppets are an extraordinary portal for connection and change, a bridge between two worlds, to feel safe, to feel listened to belong, and to laugh. And in the context of aged care, that's a necessary sort of medicine. How do we do it? So Forever Young was built slowly and carefully across 2 years. We worked with aged care providers, the University of Tasmania, and a wide creative team. We tested ideas around facilities around Hobart, roving puppets, shadow puppetry, full performances of existing works, creative writing exercises, intergenerational workshops, installations, intimate bedside visits. We tried everything, and everything worked. I spent hours inside aged care homes, learning the rhythms of their days, listening to their stories, noting what worked and what didn't work. We were careful not to patronise or create anything that might look like child's play. And we thought about everything. We thought about the length of the show, the lighting, the sound, the furniture, the way that we would welcome the elders, the set reveals, the furniture, the songs, what triggered memory, how to include sensitive and obvious later life themes, how to support them as a group, and how to support them as individuals. And most importantly, what style of puppetry would feel accessible without being alienating. The result was a program that certainly had entertainment value, but was absolutely drenched in therapeutic practice. And we brought the theatre into the homes. You can watch a video.
We've been working on developing Forever Young for about 18 months, a long process of trialling and testing different things to really find out what worked for audiences in aged care and also for staff and for our performers. So we tested a lot of different snippets of performance. We've worked with different puppets, and over the last 6 months we've been developing this new show currently titled Joan and Judy.
Oh, it's a long way to tickle Mary,
which we're performing this week in Uniting Age Well.
Quite often for a lot of residents who may find it difficult to actually be able to engage over a lengthy period of time for what whatever reason, I saw that some of those residents were actually, the performance was able to actually capture their attention and their interest for the whole performance. And just to see the laughter and the clapping and the frivolity and the comradeship within the residents and the staff was really special to see. And it's also about actually creating opportunity and new experience for residents, and acknowledging that just because people become older within their life and they may move into residential aged care, it doesn't mean that they actually stop living and stop enjoying.
I just thought that the whole lot was great.
Very different to what I expected. I did love Joni, the puppet. I couldn't get past her face. It's all... So for a puppet, she was alive.
I think the storyline, how it actually reminisced back to somebody's earlier life and then progressed throughout the performance and had Joan as the central character, it actually enabled people to identify that people do actually get older, you know, and live throughout their life.
So that, after 2 years, was the program. We landed on a full day. It was a full day experience, but two different parts throughout the day. And that included a group performance and some more intimate bedside visits. The performance, in development, we actually went around and asked the residents what comes to mind when you think of the word puppetry. And a lot of them said Punch and Judy. That was like a repeated theme, Punch and Judy, Punch and Judy. And we deliberately did not want to touch Punch and Judy for obvious reasons. And but what we did do was create those nostalgic motifs, and we put that into a 45-minute theatre piece centred around our hero character, Joan, moving into moving into an aged care home. And so the show begins with Punch and Judy, but then is quickly interrupted by Joan trying to tell her own life and her own story through shadow puppetry. And the play was full of humour, grounded in lived experience. We saw women in the audience who seemed to be really quiet and not really engaging at all suddenly come to life and start heckling and laughing and saying inappropriate things. Those sausages remind me of my husband. So anyway, it was a good time. The set was filled with familiar objects, and every story that was told originated from a resident's real experience that we heard in the development phase. There was hype and excitement, and it was a really shared collective experience. The second part of the program were the individuals or the bedside visits, and these were much more intimate. These were 15-minute improvised adaptive sessions that were for those that couldn't be in a group setting. So there might be particular behaviours that prevented that. They were isolated. Maybe there was depression involved. Most likely they had dementia. And these were guided by staff notes, which allowed us to meet the resident where they were at. We had 3 performers on the ground, and one was the puppeteer, the second was a face-to-face relationship-based person, and the third was what we called the sweep or the note taker. And their role was to mainly make sure that the resident wasn't in any distress after they'd had that interaction, that experience. It also meant that they all rotated between the care and the creativity. And those sessions were prepared using a drama therapy model of care, a developmental model, embodiment projection role, which was adapted for adults. So if we had an elder with early stages of dementia, then we would go in and use role, story making and dialogue. If it was moderate dementia, then we would use projection, expressing through the puppet. If it was advanced dementia, then we would use embodiment, so sensory connection, often involving movement and nonverbal. So what did we observe? This is where the humour part comes in. There are so many things that I could share, so many little micro moments of joy and a shift or a change from someone that might have been presenting as quite distressed or in discomfort to this moment of presence, and that always or often involved laughter. There's just 2 little antidotes, and then I'll get off, that I'll share. The first one, we'll call her Jill. I was going to call her Joan, but that gets confusing. We'll call her Jill. And we were warned by staff to just be cautious with Jill. Jill had multiple miscarriages. We had a baby puppet with us. She was described as not really engaging in any activities and not really interested in seeing anyone that was a visiting contractor. We were told that she would visibly often become distressed and start crying, and they thought that the puppet would trigger her, of course. But carefully and respectfully, we introduced the puppet from the far side of the room, so it was just an invitation. And she caught sight of the puppet, and she quickly scattered over and held the puppet, like came quite close up to this puppet. And she engaged in this sort of like own storytelling narrative that I don't really know what happened in that moment. But she started to stroke the face. She was dancing with the puppet, and she was laughing. She was just laughing to herself. But that had a ripple effect, and staff had tears in their eyes. Staff were laughing. Other residents were also laughing. Staff shared they haven't seen her like that in a very long time. And it was just a really intimate experience that was very cathartic for everybody that was involved. And the second person I'll speak about, we'll call this fellow Jack. And Jack was in progressed stages of dementia, and Jack was wandering the halls. Jack was also trying to hop into other residents' beds and very confused and very disorientated. He was speaking gibberish as well. So we brought the cat puppet into his focus, and he was a bit disinterested at first, but then he sort of started to engage in this play. He just locked on, and he started and just started doing this there was no sensical language or dialogue involved, but he was barking. The cat was responding in this really beautiful, like attuned breathing thing that the puppeteer was doing. And then he was laughing. So he would bark, 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 and then belly, belly laugh, and bark, 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 and belly, belly laugh. So it was, and then after this sort of explosive, energetic moment, he just rested his head on the head of the puppet, and it was this closure of containment and stillness that was very connected. So I think it's important to say that we didn't set out to entertain elders, and that we didn't want to make it about cheap laughs or slapstick or just even entertainment. We wanted to use puppetry as a tool to celebrate the wholeness of life and all of its stages, the joy, the grief, the love, the loss, and the ridiculous. We wanted to notice, and what we noticed, in that exchange of genuineness, in all of the acknowledgement that all is welcome, that residents were also given permission to laugh. It didn't matter your culture, your religion, your wealth, or your cognition, laughter included all. The program brought tears, but my gosh, it brought laughter. And we saw change for the residents themselves, for the staff who witnessed and contributed, and for the families who shared their moments with their loved ones. And that's just a quick snapshot of the community response, because we had a really big community response. And I just wanted to add one final thing to that in 2024, the program reached 1,735 residents. So it had a big reach. And finally, where to now? Well, this October, we're touring a modified version around Hobart, focusing just solely on the one-on-ones. But our vision for Forever Young is to offer a whole wide range of options, from performances to bedside visits to intergenerational workshops and staff training. At present, we're grant funded and seeking partners to sustain the program. So cringe, but if that feels like something you'd like to be involved in, come and love to have a chat. After all, if laughter really is the best medicine, then we think we've got a pretty worthy prescription.
Fantastic. What great examples of the feel good, the contagiousness, the potential for laughter to actually generate a relaxation response in us as well as the feel good stuff. It seems like very good medicine to me. Thank you very much, Danielle. Okay, so now we'll invite to the stage Dr. David Backer. David is a clinical psychologist at Archer Street Health and a lecturer in clinical psych at the University of Tasmania. We're very pleased to have him here. He has a great deal of experience running comedy rooms in Tasmania. We may have come across him through other pathways. So David will also explore with us this evening the psychological effects of humour, his experience running comedy rooms, and why some jokes resonate more deeply, and how laughter can foster connection even in some tough moments. Thank you, David.
All right. Thank you, Larissa. I'd like to, I suppose, start talking tonight about a theme that has been carried on through some of these other presentations, which is connection. So it's my belief that comedy and therapy, psychological therapy, share this one key ingredient. So hopefully I can convince you tonight and show you some of the photos from our beautiful, vibrant comedy scene that we have here in Hobart and Tasmania. So let's start by asking ourselves, what is comedy? I mean, it's an art form, I guess. You could kind of say that's not a joke. It is. Sure, it is an art form. I need to convince myself of that. Because at its purest, it is just a person talking. And that's deceptively simple, though, because it's not just that, is it? It's so much more. It's incredibly complex. If you went to a comedian and said, how do you write a joke? They won't know. They won't be able to tell you. They won't be able to say, oh, it's this theory or this formula or anything. You just know, right? It's not something you can put into words or to analyze any further than that. And no other art form has such an immediate, obvious and important dialogue between the artist and the audience as in comedy. If you're a comedian and you're doing art, sure, it's art. Convince myself of that. You know if it's bad art immediately, right? So no other art form has that sort of back and forth. So at the end of the day, it is all about connection. Like if the audience feels like they can connect with the comic, if the comic feels a connection with the audience, and also more importantly, whether the ideas that are being shared are connective in themselves. I want to try to explain what I mean by that by explaining what makes something funny. Now, there's a bunch of theories blown around about that. I suppose we've shared a few already tonight. My favorite theory about what makes something funny is we find something funny when we get two ideas in our head that are seemingly opposed, but are able to connect, right? Evolutionarily, that's kind of the theory of how it all came to pass. And those two ideas used to be, evolutionarily, we are in danger, but now we are safe. Those two ideas. It's even been documented that modern apes let out a whooping sound when there's been a predator nearby, but now we're safe. All good. It's the same sort of feeling that you'd have in the savannah. There's a rustling in the bushes. Is that a tiger? No, it's just Terry. He's looking for berries. Terry and his berries. So it's two incongruent ideas at the same time. And I think that's actually what makes something funny, that connection between these two ideas. So to tell you a little bit more about that, I'll tell you a bit more about this room called the Clubhouse that a comedian in Tasmania and I, Tim Logan and myself, started back in 2011. Oh, that's a long time ago. That makes me feel dizzy. Right back in 2011, we started a little fun room in a cramped upstairs room in North Hobart. It was way too hot. And we had a bit of fun there. We eventually moved to the big band room at the Waratah Hotel. Look out, go us. And that meant that we could get interstate headliners down, big acts from the Big Smoke. They came and did comedy in our room. And we had some terrific shows there over the next few years. We made lots of memories, made lots of connections, whether it be with the audiences themselves, or I suppose in the green room afterwards. There we go. We got lots of friends. We also started a room up in Launceston called Fresh Comedy not too long after that, because we figured that maybe while we've got them trapped in the state, we can get them to do another show. And we took them to this wonderful little space at the back of a cafe called Fresh on Charles, which is just a magical place that doesn't exist anymore. And some of my best memories are in that little room back there. It still is going to this day, Fresh Comedy, under the stewardship of Stuart Bell in Launceston, which I'm very, very proud of. And also Falls Festival. We had great times at Falls Festival doing shows there and connecting with audiences and connecting with each other. Then in 2014, I got an opportunity to study psychology at Monash University, postgraduate psychology. I was very excited about that because it was Melbourne, the big smoke, off we go. And it was going to be great because that's where the Melbourne International Comedy Festival is. Yeah, so I'm going to be doing comedy all the time. It's going to be excellent. I was miserable. Yeah, I really was. Like, the university side was going great. I ended up being fortunate enough to put together a mental health app, shameless plug there, called Mood Mission. But the comedy side was horrible. I just didn't feel connected at all. I tried to go to shows, and the shows that you went to weren't very connective when you were performing in front of 4 people in the back of a pub. Each of those people were about to be performing after you as well. So the encouragement they provided was somewhat limited. And I hated it. I really did. And that's why it was so nice to come back to Tasmania in 2019 and to put shows back on at the Clubhouse, which we've been doing basically every month since then, and feeling the connections that you can through putting on live comedy. There's nothing really to match it, including all of the local acts that we have on. I think Hobart or Tasmania more broadly produces such a wealth of comedic talent, maybe because of the strength of our connections in our community or the license that we have to do weird and interesting creative things here on our little island home. But also with the audiences, like being able to connect with them once more in a place that I felt part of a community is so, so important. Now, jumping off from that, we also got to put on something called the Tassie Mental Health Comedy Roadshow. We've been doing that for the past 7 years now. This year is 8, year number 8. We started it with a fellow comedian and social worker, Brittany Slezak, but it's been going on since then with the help of so many great comedians, including Daryl, who's on the screen right now. This is a show that we did in Buckland Church last year, which is I've never done a show in a church before, and it was one of the best shows I've ever experienced. It was so much fun. But being able to also do therapy to Batman on stage. Basically, all the comedians do sets about mental health. So every joke is about mental health. And some people say, you can't joke about mental health. That's a bit insensitive. But that's the whole point, right? The whole point is to find the connection between the dark ideas and the light. That's what all humour is. So how is therapy like comedy? Let's try and explore that a little bit more. Because at the end of the day, I think they're both connection. They're both ways of connecting two opposing ideas for people. In therapy, we often find people who might be embedded in a belief and an idea that life is meaningless, but we have to help them find the idea, I will find meaning and purpose in life. We can't just replace the ideas. We have to find a connection between the two. Otherwise, it's not their idea. Otherwise, they won't believe it. So we have to connect them. Or we might find people who believe, I must worry to prevent bad things from happening. That's a very common idea to hold tightly and to feel very anxious about. And so our job as a psychologist is to connect that to, well, bad things will happen regardless of how much I worry. There's nothing you can do about it. Or in fact, if you've experienced trauma in your life, you might be stuck in the idea of, I am under threat. And you're stuck there. And the idea behind therapy is that you introduce the idea of, I am safe now. And we need to find a connection between those two ideas for healing to work. And the tools that we use in therapy are a bit similar to comedy in that way as well. We use lots of tools that focus on things like cognitive reframing and flexibility. So what I mean by that is thinking about something from a different perspective, right? That just sounds like comedy as well, right? Or attentional change, techniques like mindfulness, they all involve focusing our attention on something else. Who's been to see an observational comedian before and found them noticing things that they've never noticed before? And also social support and connection, which we've thoroughly detailed already with the other speakers, that feeling of connection that you get just from being in a room with other people going through the same thing is so important for our mental health. So I wanted to try and illustrate this by telling you one of my favorite jokes, how it might be similar to being a psychologist as well in some weird, perverse way. So basically, I lived in Melbourne and that was great. And then moved back to Tasmania and that was so, so good. I'm so thankful to be back here in my island home. However, there is one small thing that I miss about Melbourne, and that is if you're in traffic in Melbourne and you want to change lanes, all you do is you just turn the indicator on. That's all you do. Just simple flick of the wrist, and that signals to the car behind you in the other lane. And what they do is they see that and go, oh, a fellow traveller wishes to join with me upon yonder path. I will thus adjust my speed, modulating it. Thus, a gap is formed. Now you can merge into my lane. Oh, hooray. We are both in this together. On to victory. That's what happens in Melbourne. In Tassie, if you want to change lanes and you turn on your indicator, go on, give it a flick. The car behind you in the other lane goes, no. Who are you to come along here and try to claim my lane? I've been in this lane for the past 14 blocks, so I know where I'm going. I know I need to be. And don't give me this one. Don't give me this one. You didn't realise it was going to turn into a left-hand only lane. Oh, I didn't realise about this lane at the top of Davies Street near the Globe Hotel. I didn't realise. No, because we learn about that lane in kindergarten here. So see you later. You're off to Taroona. The thing I like about that joke is these three things. Because the first one, like thinking about something from a different point of view, we have all been both of those people, right? We've all been trying to be let in, and we've also been the people going, no, I'm going to get as close to this other car's bumper as I can. And we've got to reconcile that, right? We've got to connect those two parts of ourselves to go, you know what? I think maybe I could do better. Second part, attentional. Maybe I'm drawing your attention to the fact that this happens, people. We need to do better. And you're all laughing in the room, right? Like most of you, like you're laughing, and through that laughter, you're connecting that shared experience. And that's why that joke works in Tasmania, but not really anywhere else. So before I go, shameless plug, shows are happening coming up. Come to one of the shows. Good. All right. That's the website. Buy the tickets now. Flash on the screen. Excellent. But I also just want to finish by thanking everyone who's been a part of the Hobart comedy scene over the years. I know I'm not going to mention all of the rooms and all of the happenings because there are so many amazing, amazing people involved. Not only the comedians, the local acts, but also the audiences for coming along and believing in live comedy. It's a very special thing close to my heart. And I just want to say thank you to everyone involved. And I hope you all tonight have an excellent evening. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. Yes, I did have a big chuckle about that Tasmanian roads thing. All right. So finally, we have our last speaker this evening, and I'm really looking forward to this. It's time to put some theory into practice. So we have a bit of a comedy set right now. So comedian, performer and raw comedy finalist, Scott Leonard, will share his unique take on life, proving that sometimes the best way to understand humour is just simply to enjoy it. So can we have a big round of applause for Scott?
Alrighty, simmer down. Did you all know that antidepressants also work on lobsters? I heard that tonight was vaguely mental health themed. I hope that fits the mold. Well, I'm maxed with whimsy to be a part of this panel tonight. The topic of laughter is the best medicine strikes a bright ukulele chord with me. When I'm not telling you all interesting facts about lobsters, I'm actually at my day job. I work as a receptionist for a psychology practice. And it's awesome being a receptionist. I mean, every day I see brave souls come in and speak to qualified psychologists who, with a blend of professionalism and care, can help them tackle the struggles of their mental health. But first, they got to get through me. I'm the type of receptionist we like to call in the business as out of hand. For instance, this is what the average call at my psychology practice looks like. Ring, ring. Hello, psychology practice. This is Scott speaking. See, laughter really is the best medicine. And I should know. Around 2013, I was diagnosed with cancer. Around 12 months ago, I was diagnosed with being a stand-up comedian. And the autism diagnosis has been chasing me my whole life, but it'll never catch me. That's not true. Well, I actually don't know if I have autism, but I do have a brain tumor, so I suppose I'm not neurotypical. Just gonna pat the tumor for that one. But I know that cancer jokes really aren't everyone's cup of tea, and it can often be a bit of a difficult segue in the old comedy routine. That being said, last time I said on stage that I had cancer, someone in the back row cheered really loudly, which honestly was so refreshing. I've had a lot of sympathy cards dealt my whole life about this cancer debacle, but I much prefer enthusiasm. That absolutely felt wonderful. I'm going to say I have cancer again, and I want you to cheer with as much zeal and enthusiasm that you can summon. Bring the house down at you, Taz. One moment. I have cancer. That was so much better than my Make-A-Wish. Thank you. Of my next trick, though, I've got something a bit special planned. I've actually got a joke that isn't about having cancer, if you'd like to hear it. It goes a little something like this. Hey, you, Taz. You want to know what I'm like in a nutshell? Hey, get me out of this nutshell. Okay, back to the cancer jokes. Like I said, I've been doing stand-up comedy for about 12 months, but I have been immersed in comedy since I was a little curly-haired boy. In fact, I was tutored by giants in the local Nipaluna comedy scene. The clown doctors at the Royal Hobart Hospital. Clown doctors are a wonderful bunch. I mean, each day they spread joy where it's needed most, fueled only by the laughter and hope of children. Only problem was, I was 14 years old. I had just found out what Radiohead was. The clown doctors would often refer to me as the chemo curmudgeon. But that being said, I was a tough audience, but there was one time that they genuinely made me tee-hee with delight. They were up to their usual antics, you know, making balloon animals, juggling syringes. And I was not happy. I was too busy drinking the haterade, as they say. They decided to make a little show of them leaving. The alpha of the clown doctors turned to his comrades and went, "Well, looky here. Looks like the chemo curmudgeon wants us to leave." And then in a final inspired act of slapstick jest, he missed the wall on his way out and face planted into the wall. The wall, which contained the emergency pager. Suddenly, a myriad of doctors, nurses, specialists raced into the room. I've never seen so many scrubs in my life. There were monitors, defibrillators, and one clown doctor in the corner watching his career in comedy crumble before his eyes. I am but a biscuit to a jar. But I just want to say that I've really, really enjoyed my time here. I'm not dying, by the way. I always have to preface that. But I really do believe everything that's been said on this panel, laughter being the best medicine. I do remember hearing earlier that the phrase that comedy can't cure cancer, which is objectively true. But last year, just in January, I finished radiotherapy and I was the most tired I've ever been in my whole life. And I had no energy to go clubbing, couldn't go to music acts anymore. But I found stand-up comedies like the Clubhouse and different rooms. I finally found something I could enjoy. I could just sit there, laugh for a while, and then I ended up going so many times that they encouraged me to go give it a try. And I thought, I kind of did leave in the literal sense that laughter was the best medicine. And if anyone out there has ever been worried about being more open about their mental health, physical health, or anything, just remember that if antidepressants can work on lobsters, just imagine what a little bit of talking can do as well. All right, I've been Scott Leonard. Rain races the flowers, not thunder. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you very much, Scott. Yeah, absolutely. Turning things, just turn up and be there and soak it up and enjoy the humour, right? You know, wherever we can find it. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for sticking around for the Q&A. So there's a question here for Danielle. And the question is, are there plans for Forever Young to be even more accessible, for example, to multicultural background or deaf or aged communities? Also, is there any clinical difference between attending a show in person versus watching a show online?
Yes, the answer is yes, the short answer. But I guess the longer version is that we try already with Terrapin to do modified versions of the program so that it's not just a one model fits all. And already we're doing some shadow puppetry, some shadow puppetry workshops, which are based off some of the things that we explored during Forever Young and are going into migrant communities, particularly with the Migrant Resource Centre, where we hear stories and then we create shadow puppetry stories based back on what we hear from their lived experiences. So it is already happening in a way. Forever Young, specifically in an elder space, I suppose that the one-on-ones is really where that sits because they're adaptive to whoever is in front of us. So it is an inclusive being. It was never meant for, it's not a performed piece. So to answer the question, the second part of the question, what was the second part? Clinical practice.
Yes, so the question was about watching something online or being in real life.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is a really, I think this is a personal preference, actually. And I feel like you can never really get away from the impacts of having a relational experience and the power of the here and the now and actually having a puppet respond to you. And there's nuances, right? Like, so there's the breath of the puppet, there's the way that the puppet might tilt its head or mirror your body language. And I believe a lot of that would be lost if it was something that was actually projected through a screen. Having said that, it's not a hard no. I think that there is definitely ways that the program could, and we have done things like that, recorded the show itself and actually had it shared across various different sites around Tasmania, watching the show back. So I believe in the power of person interaction, but it's not to say that there couldn't be other options. Yeah.
With regard to humour, with connection, I find humour the unexpected very funny. If I can feel as if I know what's coming, I don't, but the unexpected is very good. And humour can basically ameliorate tension. My question was the unexpected. Could David expand?
You'd like David to speak to that? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the ways of the two ideas, the standard way of doing things, and then something unexpected happens, a surprise. And I suppose the connection between those two is usually what makes it funny. And the surprise, the unexpected thing has to be safe. It can't be terrifying or obliterating or tragic or anything like that, because then it's not funny. So it has to be something that gives us a sense of relief or safety, which I suppose, like as Daz talked about, embarrassment. It's not funny if you just stay embarrassed and traumatized. It's funny when you go, that was silly. And then you realize it was a moment that just passes by and everything is fine. So I think, yeah, Hannah Gadsby in Nanette talks a lot about that expectation, and that would be a great thing to go and watch if you wanted to.
If I could jump in, it's telling a joke's like going on a journey and the people are expecting you to arrive at a certain point on that journey, but right at the end, you do a diversion, left or right. And I'm just trying to think, I mean, limericks are a pretty low form, but there was a young chappie from Fordham, an old spinster from Fordham went walking out of sexual boredom, but on their way back, a sex maniac jumped into her path and ignored him. You don't quite know where it's going until it turns left or right.
Thank you, Daryl. We've got a couple of questions online about laughter therapy and laughter yoga. And I know, Alison, you've done a little bit of reading about that. So yeah, there's a couple of different questions, so I won't read them out, but I know it'd be great to touch on laughter therapy and yoga therapy.
Well, I can define yoga therapy for you, and David might have some good examples of how he may have used it in the clinics. But yoga therapy really is moving your body and creating movements and forcing laughter. So forcing the sound of laughter and the feeling of laughter, and can involve movement until you might turn into spontaneous laughter. So it's doing funny things that build. You often do it together. And as you do that, you generate these feelings of connection, no doubt. And somebody would start laughing and then someone else starts laughing, and that infectious sort of social connection can take over. That's my understanding of how it works. I haven't been to any laughter yoga classes, but that's my understanding of it. And it can be very effective.
Yeah. Is laughter yoga the same thing as laughter therapy?
No, I think laughter therapy is a little bit more well-formed, and it's
been around
broader
for a bit longer. David, do you know much about the laughter therapy?
No, no, nothing at all about it. But it sounds fantastic. I think it sounds like a great initiative to get the physiological effects happening. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that a fair bit of the evidence around the benefits of laughter have come from studies of laughter therapy. So a
lot of them have, and that's because it's easy to control.
Yes.
And as scientists, you like to come up with, two groups, one group that has the laughter therapy and one who doesn't. And when I was talking earlier, I didn't talk about the control groups, but they were people who sat and watched videos that weren't funny, or who sat quietly and read a book and then did a wall sit. They're the comparisons that we look at. They might have the same, cortisol level measurements, but they don't get the humour.
Thank you. Have we got another in-room question up here in the orange?
This is for David. I've had the privilege of watching David doing improvised theatre with Theatre Sports in Hobart, and if anybody's not been, I can only recommend going. I almost hang out for the monthly hit of humour that I get at that evening. And when other stresses are happening in your life and you go and it's Friday evening and you're tired, you think, oh, have I got the energy? But you get there and I always walk out feeling totally uplifted, and I've laughed almost nonstop for an hour and a half. My question is, how often does one need to be exposed to, that's a pretty intense, funny period of time, and the actors are so clever. And it's hilarious. But how often would you as a therapist say, you should laugh? I live on my own. It's hard to laugh on your own. And at times life gets tough. And I'm just interested in, and also with the Forever Young program, does one session have an ongoing effect for those elderly people, or would it be something that you'd encourage the staff to revisit, or what's your feeling about
very quickly
a timeline?
I'll add one thought there, just to answer on the Forever Young part. We were evaluated. They did an independent evaluation through the University of Tasmania, run by Marianne Hunter. And one part of the research that really stood out to me was the prolonged effects. So they did some questionnaires around if some residents remembered the experience, and if there had been ongoing symptoms of the experience. And yeah, there was many people that said that I still remember the experience and I still feel joy thinking about the experience. So there's like a muscle memory of that laughter experience.
And as it goes, how often, I think is how often as you like, how often you can afford it. I haven't been to theatre sports in a long time because I have a 5-month-old now. So I've had to be quite specific and surgical in how I spend my time on stage. But I think if you can go every week, great. If you can't, that's fine as well. Try not to overdo it. I do know that, for example, there's a thing called the Funny Ton in the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. And there was a comedian from down here, Chris Menzies, who attempted it. It's basically you get a pass and go to any show. You have to go to as many shows as you can for the month. And I think he went to 140 shows or over. And I saw him halfway through the festival and dead behind the eyes. I was having a great time at the show and he was not. So you can deplete the reserves. Try not to do that, but get out as much as you like.
So we can overdose on laughter, maybe. Yeah. Fantastic, thank you. I've got a question here. I think probably this one is for Alison. It's do the neurotransmitters in the brain produced by laughter transfer down the body via the nervous system?
Oh, that's a great question. Usually when neurotransmitters are released, they have a very local action. So it's only in the immediate area of where the synapse is, that little gap between the neurons. But some of the neurons themselves are very long. And so the image that I showed, for those who could see the images, were single long neurons, but a lot of the neurons are branched. And so the activity in those neurons, once it gets initiated, can send the electrical communication all over the nervous system. They're very highly branched and some are really large, long neurons. So the neurotransmitter itself doesn't move very far, but the effect of it can travel through an electrical wave of energy going down. Some of the neurotransmitters actually get produced and released by the pituitary gland, which empties into the blood. And they're the endorphins and oxytocin are the two examples that I shared earlier. And those ones get released by the pituitary and then they can travel around the blood and they can have effects all over the body. So they do get to other parts of the body.
They have a little transition or transformation on the way.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And they work in different ways. And then they have those gates or the receptors that are ready to receive them in different parts of the body.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Have we got another question in the room? Yes, over here.
My question is, laughter. We talk about laughter being a medicine. And humour obviously is one way of getting there. And that can be very varied depending on where you come from, who you are and all the rest of it. But what about tickling? What happens if you get physical stimulation, which causes laughter?
Well, it doesn't really matter how the laughter starts. The physical benefits that you get and the psychological benefits are the same. Tickling is a great way, but you can get tickled out or you become immune to it. It's good to switch gears then and find another way, another method to make you laugh. But there are different ways. Drugs as well. We talked a bit about laughing gas, the nitrous oxide. There are other types of drugs that you can take that stimulate laughter as well, or stimulate the release of the same neurotransmitters. Yeah. So there are other ways. Tickling is a great one, especially for young children or for people who might not have the cognitive capacity to recognize the absurd or the change in the joke.
Thank you. And good question, that one. And we've got here.
Hi, I'm absolutely fascinated by the fact that you provide material for laughter, particularly with the aged and those with dementia or the ill. I'm a teacher and deal with a lot of young people who are in really dark places and trying to teach them that curriculum isn't going to get anywhere. Are there ways, are there avenues, what strategies would you suggest, any of you, to bring laughter to teenagers who because they do know everything, and I'm struggling to find something and I use their lingo and which makes them cringe, but just different strategies to bring them out of that dark place? That'd be great.
Yeah, great question. I'm going to defer to our resident clinical psychologist over here.
Sure. I suppose self-deprecating stuff is always going to go far. I think being able to say, I'm not an authority figure up here. I'm not just one of you guys, not like that necessarily, but being able to take yourself off that perch. It's difficult, right? And I think it's acknowledging that young people's sense of humor and what they laugh at is going to be them trying to find who they are. So respecting that and respecting their search for autonomy, I think can be something to keep coming back to. But yeah, look, I have no no helpful just say this word hints. That's always going to be in their realm.
Someone asked me the other day if I remembered anything from science in high school, which was less than 10 years ago for me, but it was basically nothing except that my science teacher told me that cations are positive because cats have paws. It was the worst joke I've ever heard, but it will never leave me. And for me, that way of humor really helped. He also once dropped a Bunsen burner, and I learned never to do that, but it really helped me engage in the lesson. So I always found those teachers who were memorable and engaged and didn't feel the need to make it too clinical.
Yeah, nice. Yes, I'm not sure if I have any answers either around making teenagers find the light side of life from the on high of the adult life. It's a tough gig, but definitely worth pursuing. I've got a question here, and I thought I quite like this. It's quite cultural. As a lady, I've been taught not to laugh out loud where possible. Yeah. Do I still get the benefit if I give a big smile, or does laughing out loud actually get more benefit and exercise?
I'd say you need to laugh out loud. Yeah. So maybe store it up inside and have a laugh later. It's all about the muscles being used, the breathing rate increasing. Getting a bit of exercise is what really helps. Yeah.
Myth busting.
You can die of terminal seriousness, folks.
We have another question. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. We have one more question. Time for one more question.
Hello. Just a quick question. Why is it when you laugh sometimes you actually get the giggles and can't stop?
I think that's probably usually that wouldn't happen by yourself. I imagine if you're sitting alone in your lounge room, you don't necessarily burst into fits of giggles, no matter how funny the stimulus is, the television you're watching or whatever. I think the giggling comes from the feedback you're getting from those around you, just their reactions, and it's like negativity's contagious, so too is positivity, and if we're all worried about spreading the flu, what we should be doing is spreading joy, and that's done through laughter in a community. Yep.
Beautiful, Daryl. What a lovely note to finish on. And it is really worth remembering that what we practice grows. It grows in our bodies as well as in our minds. And so we practice humour and laughter, and we'll get more humour and laughter in our lives. I am now tasked with the role of wrapping up. Sadly, we've reached the end of our discussion. If you enjoyed tonight's talk, we'd love to see you at more of the Island of Ideas events. Head over to the webpage for details. So please join me in a round of applause for our brilliant guests, Dr. Daryl Peebles, Associate Professor Alison Canty, Danielle Jackson, Dr. David Backer, and Scott Leonard. Thank you. Thank you also to our live stream audience for your questions and your engagement, and everyone here in the room for bringing such great energy in this evening with you. On behalf of the University of Tasmania, have a happy, safe, and laughter-filled evening. Good night.